The moment I saw her face across the cafe, my breath collapsed in my chest like a building giving way, because the woman I had agreed to meet for a harmless blind date was the same woman who had once stood at my father's funeral, her hands trembling as she held mine, the same woman I had spent years silently blaming for everything I lost, and in that instant I knew my life was about to be split into a before and an after I could never escape. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the soft music, the clinking cups, the ordinary lives unfolding around us, because nothing about this was ordinary anymore, and the universe had just played a cruel, bewildering trick that forced me to confront a past I thought I had buried. Before the shock settles any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of forgiveness that can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can keep reaching hearts that need them. I had agreed to the blind date out of exhaustion more than hope, nudged by friends who thought I was hiding behind work and grief, who believed companionship could stitch together the parts of me that never healed after my father died. I went in with low expectations, picturing a polite stranger, a stiff conversation, and our sacrifice to prove I was trying. Instead, fate placed my stepmother in front of me, older than I remembered, lines of quiet endurance etched into her face, eyes carrying the same sadness I had pretended not to see for years. The air between us felt heavy with things unsaid, with years of misunderstanding and distance that had calcified into resentment on my side and guilt on hers. I wanted to stand up and leave, to call the whole thing a mistake, but my legs refused to move, because some part of me knew this collision was not random. She had entered my life when I was already a teenager, stubborn, loyal to my mother's memory, and deeply resistant to any woman who dared to stand where she once stood. I never gave her a chance. Every attempt she made to reach me felt like an intrusion, every kindness like an overstep. When my father died suddenly, the fragile bridge between us collapsed entirely. I moved out soon after, carrying with me an unspoken accusation that she had stolen time, attention, and a future I felt entitled to. Years passed, and I told myself I was fine, that independence suited me, that anger was easier than grief. But sitting across from her now, I realized how much of my life had been shaped by what I refused to confront. The cafe scene unfolded slowly, painfully cinematic, with sunlight slanting through the windows and dust motes hanging in the air like frozen memories. We exchanged awkward smiles, the kind people wear when they are trying not to shatter. The absurdity of the situation pressed down on me, yet beneath it was something raw and trembling. This wasn't about a date. It was about two people who had been orbiting the same wound for years, never daring to touch it. I noticed how she held herself, composed but fragile, as if bracing for rejection she had come to expect. For the first time, I wondered what my silence had done to her, how my cold distance might have deepened her own grief. As the afternoon stretched on, the tension shifted from shock to reflection. My anger, once so sharp, began to feel heavy and outdated, like armor worn long after the battle ended. I remembered small moments I had dismissed before, her waiting up for me when I came home late, her quiet presence at school events, her hesitation whenever she tried to step into a role she knew I resented. I had labeled her the outsider, but now I saw how lonely that position must have been. The realization didn't excuse my pain, but it softened it, reshaping it into something more complex and human. Life has a way of forcing growth through discomfort, and that meeting was exactly that kind of reckoning. I began to understand that grief doesn't belong to one person alone. While I had lost a father, she had lost a husband, and the future she imagined vanished overnight. Yet she stayed, holding on to responsibility and love that were never returned. I had walked away, but she remained, surrounded by reminders of a family that never fully accepted her. That imbalance haunted me as I replayed the years in my mind, recognizing how easy it had been to villainize someone who was simply trying to belong. Leaving the cafe that day, the world felt altered, as though a filter had been lifted. The sky looked wider, the streets louder, my thoughts heavier. I didn't know what the next step was, only that pretending this never happened was no longer an option. Over the following weeks, memories surfaced uninvited, nudging me toward uncomfortable empathy. I realized how much of my identity was tied to unresolved anger, how it had shaped my relationships, my trust, my fear of closeness. Facing her again forced me to face myself, to admit that running had not protected me the way I believed it had. Gradually, change came not as a dramatic moment but as a series of small, deliberate choices. I allowed myself to remember my father without turning his memory into a weapon. I acknowledged that love is not a limited resource, that her presence in his life did not erase my mother or diminish my bond with him. The more I reflected, the more I understood that healing was less about assigning blame and more about releasing the grip of old narratives. She was not the reason my family fractured, life had done that on its own. Time continued its quiet work, and with it came a cautious rebuilding of trust. The bitterness that once surged through me softened into something gentler, something that allowed space for shared memories and mutual respect. I stopped seeing her as a symbol of loss and started seeing her as a person who had endured alongside me, even if our paths diverged. The blind date that began as a cruel twist of fate revealed itself as an unexpected invitation to grow, to rewrite a story I had clung to for too long. As I reflect on that chapter now, I see how easily we misunderstand the roles people play in our lives, how pain can distort perception and turn allies into enemies. The encounter didn't magically fix everything, but it cracked open a door I had sealed shut, letting light spill into places I thought were permanently dark. It reminded me that forgiveness is not an act of forgetting but a decision to move forward without the weight of unresolved anger dragging behind. If this story has touched your heart, if it stirred memories of your own complicated relationships or moments where life forced you to confront uncomfortable truths, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach people who are quietly hurting. And before we reach the end, I'd really love to hear from you, so please comment below about a time when life surprised you in a painful but meaningful way, because your story might help someone else feel less alone. In the end, I never expected a blind date to lead me back to my stepmother, or to myself, but sometimes healing arrives disguised as discomfort, and growth begins where denial ends. That unexpected meeting taught me that second chances don't always look the way we imagine, and that the bravest thing we can do is face the past with open eyes and an open heart, allowing compassion to replace resentment and understanding to take the place of blame.